Well, we're in a unit which focuses upon examples of giving in the New Testament. You know how it is on the evening news when something horrific is about to be reported, and they'll give you a warning that the following news story may have some disturbing video in there. Well, I wanted to give you a warning. The following story, the following lesson is about giving. But let me also add a disclaimer. This is not a stewardship message. Now, if it comes across that way to you, then so much the better. But it is not intended to be a stewardship lesson. It's that time of year again, if you notice, the spiders are spinning their webs outside, and you never know how to dress, whether it's going to be cool or warm. Although we're going to have frost on the pumpkin very soon, evidently, according to the weatherman. And then it's that time of year when my mailbox is full of fundraising appeals. Now, these just came in the last day or two. And I thought, as we get into the lesson, and you'll see how this applies in a moment, I hope, we look at some of these. You all get these. This one is from the Good Samaritan Ministries, and it's about giving. Only $1.97 will pay for a meal for the homeless at this particular shelter location. And then in examining this, and you do know that fundraising is a big business. I mean, the people who prepare these, who know how to do this, and the mailings themselves are costly. This one, and by the way, there's another flyer in today's paper in case you didn't get one of these in the mail from the same organization. Bert, you're just in time. To give, I'm making some appeals on behalf of worthy organizations. And this one, you notice how a lot of times they like to stuff all kinds of little things in there that get you to read. And this one, I noticed they use that yellow underlining there to call attention to these key sentences that will try to move you to make a response. And there are appeals and there's some pictures. And so I guess I succumbed at one point, and so I've been on their mailing list. And that's a worthy thing. Then here's one from the Baptist World Alliance. Tim and I, and maybe Bill, others have been involved in the Baptist World Alliance. It's a fine organization. And here's their appeal. If I were critiquing this, I think it's a little too wordy. Mm-hmm. And I think it's too heavy on the sad tales. But then again, I know it's authentic because it bears the signature of the General Secretary, and I've heard him, and he is wordy, and he does give over to these sad stories. And this one is about giving because of the number of Baptist pastors, especially in Africa and India, who have died of the COVID. And this is an appeal for funds for their families. Now, who can deny that? And then here's one from another good organization that some of us in the room know about and support, the BJC, the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. And I'm especially concerned about its twin, the twin to religious liberty, the separation of church and state, which has been under a lot of danger lately in our country when various religious bodies have tried to misuse their influence. So here's their appeal, and it's pretty much to the point and some visuals. And Another thing about these appeals, I'm sure they found it pays for them to put in an envelope. Not enough for them to include the postage, but if you don't have the envelope, then you're probably not going to get around to finding an envelope and mailing. And then let's see, here's another one from the BJC. It's entirely different. They really own it. Here's our alma mater. And I've noticed of late that our alma mater has made its appeals, especially over the last 3 years with COVID and all. The appeal has been around save a student's emergency fund. When there's, a family cannot pay the tuition or that kind of thing. And then here's this one that came into my mailbox yesterday, perhaps in yours. Oh, yeah. And of course, it's this is a stewardship mail. Yes, it is. I'll be forthright on that. It is a stewardship mailing. And having read all of these several times, I have decided that this was by far the most superior one. I liked, of course, their reference to the 75th anniversary. Even this little graphic showing the fireplace around which those first brave souls gathered. So building the fireplace so they wouldn't have to pay real estate taxes on this because it was a place of worship. Well, anyway, it's a well-written letter and most likely legitimately written by one of the people on that committee, of which there were several who have completed high school and above. So of all of them, I particularly, I think, went with this one. So there you have a few of these appeals. And then today's lesson is a fundraising letter itself. Here I'm going to need a little bit of assistance with this side. And maybe we can get assistance right here. Tom is one of my registered agents that helps me on these. Here is a fundraising letter. More, that's good. We have plenty. There should be one for all, not just one per family. So here is a fundraising letter. I'll give you just a give you a little background about this organization. This comes from the early Christian church and from their chief apostle going out, their great missionary, Paul. And I never really thought about Paul as a fundraiser. And I think this letter deserves some critique. That might, who am I to question Paul of all people? But let's take a moment here and just silently read down on this fundraising letter from 2 Corinthians. And you at home now, while these people are reading, I want you to consider about your donation that you need to send to our ministries. this is Paul's letter to the Christians at Corinth, which was considered a fairly well-off congregation. And it's about coming forth and completing that offering, which they had previously had pledged to help the struggling poor Christians at Jerusalem. And he starts out by citing or stirring up the brothers and sisters, the poor Christians, about the poor Christians, by stirring up the brothers and sisters at Corinth, and subtly comparing their neglect to finish the offering with the overzealous response of those churches in Macedonia. You know, there's nothing that works better than creating some competition in giving. Witness all the appeals that we get about matching gifts. You know, if you'll send that gift, it's going to be matched by Miss So-and-so, Miss Got Rocks, who's giving lots of money to that worthy cause. So you give because someone else has pledged to give. There's a little bit of competition there. And do any of you remember when churches would put up those stewardship charts right in the front of the, not, we call it the sanctuary, it was the auditorium in most old time churches, but they would put up something. Maybe it's one of those kind of things, you know, where it's a thermometer. It's going up, up, up till they reach the goal. And that was supposed to give incentive towards meeting the budget. So Paul is trying to fundraise, not for himself, mind you, but for a needy church, the church at Jerusalem. And he's written his appeal with the best of intentions. It's hard to know exactly why the church in Jerusalem was so poor. Obviously, a big city like Jerusalem had many poor people, and no doubt some of them had become followers of Christ. Persecution at the hands of the temple authorities had also increased the poverty of the churches in the area. Maybe they were in financial straits because they practiced a form of early communism. You know, everybody was pooling what they had, and so that all would have something. But there are other reasons that maybe they had. So they were probably a group of small tradesmen, artisans, not a great deal of wealth in the church. And there was social ostracism attached in Jerusalem to being a part of these Christians. So they were a poor group. And Paul is trying to raise some money to help them. And he's come to a source here of people who have already been presented this appeal, but something came along and they put that appeal aside and never finished their offering. So he's after them to finish it. I think it's interesting in his letter, I don't think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but he never blatantly mentioned money. Now, he uses a lot of other words that could stand for what he wanted. He used words like grace and fellowship and ministry and blessing, proof of love. But he didn't just blatantly mention money, which is probably what some of these appeals that I got in my mailbox. Rather than being blatantly about the money, they're talking about other ways, you know, that you want to be a help, a blessing for these people who are in need or for this worthy cause. And then why in the world has Paul become so interested in this particular cause? Well, Here are several that Charles Erdman's commentary lists. One was the common grace of Christian charity, which needed to be promoted, or the fact that these particular persons were Jewish Christians, are so like he is. They're his fellow kinsmen in the faith. And then in another place, it could be looked at that since he was the apostle to the Gentiles, then he wanted to appeal to them to give, to help these people. And this gift from the Gentile churches would prove to any who were skeptical among the Jewish Christians the reality and the genuineness of the faith and the conversion of these Gentiles. And then, of course, the supreme reason was the desire to have them all become one body of Christ. So, what did you think about this fundraising letter? Now, this was written in the New Revised Standard Version. We didn't get the King James Version, so what do you think? Would this move you? Would this move the church at River and Ridge?
I'm reminded of the old hymn that we all grew up on, give up your bet to the master.
Yes, give up the
Balance.
Yeah. Well, we don't have these original letters before us that I can. We've had all these revisions, all these versions, trying to reach people at a different time and place and society. Let's listen to this appeal from the New Testament, written in contemporary language, Eugene Peterson, The Message. Now, friends, I want to report on the surprising and generous ways in which God is working in the churches in Macedonia province. Fierce troubles came down on the people of those churches, pushing them to the very limit. The trial exposed their true colors. They were incredibly happy, though desperately poor. The pressure triggered something totally unexpected, an outpouring of pure and generous gifts. I was there and I saw it for myself. They gave offerings of whatever they could, far more than they could afford, pleading for the privilege of helping out in the relief of poor Christians. This was totally spontaneous, entirely their own idea, and caught us completely off guard. What explains it was that they had first given themselves unreservedly to God and to us. The other giving simply flowed out of the purposes of God working in their lives. That's what prompted us to ask Titus to bring the relief offering to your attention, so that what was well begun could be finished up. You do so well in so many things. You trust God, you're articulate, you're insightful, you're passionate, you love us. Now do your best too. I'm not trying to order you around against your will, but by bringing in the Macedonians' enthusiasm as a stimulus to your love, I am hoping to bring out the best in you. You are familiar with the generosity of our Master, Jesus Christ. Rich as he was, he gave it all away for us. In one stroke, he became poor and we became rich. So here's what I think. The best thing you can do right now is to finish what you started last year and not let those good intentions grow stale. Your heart's been in the right place all along. You've got what it takes to finish it up, so go to it. Once the commitment is clear, you do what you can, not what you can't. It sounds like that TV commercial, you know, that the man who selling cars, he says, don't tell me what you can't do. Don't tell me what you can't do, tell me what you can do. Yeah. So he says, once the commitment is clear, you do what you can, not what you can't. The heart regulates the hands. This isn't so others can take it easy while you sweat it out. No, you're shoulder to shoulder with them all the way. Your surplus matching their deficit. Their surplus matching your deficit. In the end, you come out even. As it is written, nothing left over to the one with the most, nothing lacking to the one with the least. So that's how Paul's letter would read to 21st century Christians. Now you might be a little more prone to take out that envelope if you're a member of the Church of Corinth and finish that pledge. Well, what do you think? There you have it. Paul's fundraising appeal in contemporary language. And if you go further, because he's not done here, there's a lot more to his letter, chapter after chapter. Listen to this in contemporary language. We don't want anyone suspecting us of taking one penny of this money for ourselves. We're being as careful in our reputation with the public as in our reputation with God. That's why we're sending another trusted friend along. You know, we've all read those disappointing news accounts of charities when somebody in leadership within the charity or somebody in employment has stolen money or embezzled money that was intended for the charity. So evidently 2,000 years ago, thefts and embezzlements occurred. And Paul is trying to assure the Corinthians that he sends, and this is another contemporary language, rock solid, trustworthy representatives to come and to collect. So there'll be no one that will be tempted or even have the suspicion of dishonesty. So what can we observe from Paul's fundraising attempt? Well, first, he made the Corinthians aware of the need in Jerusalem. Or more accurately, he reminded them about the offering they had started but never finished. You might call it one of those little general reminders. Paul made them aware of the need. We can all think of times in the life of our church or this class when someone has presented a legitimate, genuine need, and we have responded. Paul motivated the Corinthians by sharing the example of the Macedonians. Jesus did the same thing. Remember the story about the poor widow who put in the 2 small coins? And yet, though it was so little, didn't amount much for the treasury, yet proportionally, she was giving sacrificial when the others were giving out of their abundance. And that's what Jesus even made his hearers aware of that. Paul used the example of Christ. He was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. Christ's richness was inferred in the fact that he was the Son of God, yet he gave over his exalted position to help all humanity, not to be ministered unto, but to minister. Christ then became the ultimate example of giving in response to need. And the need, of course, was the need of humanity. Finally, in Paul's attempt at fundraising, he addressed another characteristic of human nature, good intentions. And we all know about the pathway to hell being paved with good intentions. And we all fall prey to that. I mean, we get fundraising letters all the time. And maybe we even have a good intention that we're going to, I'd really like to help every last one of those. But you know, it sits on the desk, something else comes along, and you forget about it. Before long, the time for collecting that has passed. Don't worry, there'll be another appeal that will come. But I remember one old-time Baptist preacher in Virginia who coined what he called the now plan. You have a good intention, do it now. Don't delay, don't wait about it, do it now. So here's my question, and it's a question for us in the class, it's for those at home. We all get these. How do you handle them? I've got a friend who's a Baptist in another church. He's a man of, well, it's not polite to say, but anyway, he's a man of means. And he told me a long time ago that I get all these appeals, I only write checks once a month. So once a month, he goes through and he does it. And I'm sure he's generous. How do you handle these?
I do my church first.
Okay.
Anything else left over, we'll see. Local churches first in our lives.
And frankly, the local church has evolved into a charitable distribution agency itself. Look how much River Road Church distributes. You know, it comes in, but it goes out. A lot of worthy causes. And those worthy causes have been pretty well vetted, haven't they? Anyone else?
I think the ones that bother me the most are the telephone solicitations.
Right.
And we always say the same thing. We do not respond to telephone solicitations. If you care to send us your literature, we will consider it. And of course, 99% of the time, you don't hear anything more from them.
No.
But invariably, it's someone representing the police league who wants to take the children to the circus. Well, you know, what's not wonderful about that?
Right.
But anyway, my question is, where is Paul when he's sending this letter? Is he in Jerusalem so that he has observed this, or is he on the road and is hearing about it?
On the road again? That's a good question. And I don't know the answer to where he sends it, from where he sends the letter. Could be Jerusalem. But I was struck with the thought, which I couldn't let go, of what were the results. So I went searching about that, and I found over in the book of Acts, which of course records all these things that the apostles did. When you get to chapter 21, verse 17, 19, it tells us what the results. No, it doesn't. He says he got back to Jerusalem. That says not a word about Paul. Anybody want to help me out there? What happened? I mean, it was a big deal. What happened? we just can assume that it was collected and brought and distributed. We don't have much else we can go on. Since we accept Paul as a man of his word, I'm sure he attempted to get it back, but in the book of Acts, it doesn't say.
Fred,
Yes.
we make a comment about this. We recently moved here about a year and a half ago. And one of my things was trying to get my address changed. Mind you, most of these people, I never sent them money, and I surely didn't tell them I changed my address. But within a month, I was getting it from them. So it's big business somewhere. I think it's tied with the post office when you give permission for them to let them know. But they had no problem. And these are charities that we've never given to. And to be embarrassed, some of these that we've never given to, we don't even look at them anymore. We see their phone, we care about them. Also, that may be bad, but we should look. But, I mean, the fact gets like yours, it gets thick.
Right. And I presume too that we all have favorites. You know, their favorite causes, something that appeals to your heart. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, to me, the most offensive ones come as emails. I mean, I get emails from political things, all other kind of things. And most of those, I've never given anything to them, as you say, but somehow or another, they get your email. Get dozens of them. And I just delete them. You know, I'm not interested in giving all those things. It would be interesting to know if you indicated whether or not they really responded. Yeah, we assume they did, but we don't know for certain.
All right. Anyone else?
Well, just to give you the other side, we just moved. We're getting mail from people who lived there 10 years ago.
And are no longer on this earth. That's right.
Yeah, right.
They can take some fabulous trips if they can come back.
We did too.
We do too.
Still get mail from people who used to live there and have died.
That's right. Including this woman's alumni group. Which, and you know, at first we were sending back, but we quit doing that now. Just put it in the round file.
Don't you think these charities sell lists in the same way if you shop at a particular store? All of a sudden you get advertisements from oodles of stores that you have never been in, or they might only be online. And I just suspect that charities may do the same thing.
Right. Well, we know, again, that just the fundraising part is big business. And I'm sure you have to have a tremendous volume of, you know, contacts in order to reach down to whatever you really need. So there are these people who do most of this are professional in their field. They know what will work, what won't. I'm sure they use psychology to its fullest extent.
There's certain lists for elderly people. Did you know they get that from the agency of aging or wherever?
Right.
They draw at your heartstrings, especially on television with the children's hospitals
Right.
and things like that. And of course, I personally, and we have through the years, given to things that have had we've had personal contact with. I certainly give to Memorial Sloan Kettering. And they send me things because 10 years ago, they helped save my son's life.
Right. Exactly.
I appreciate that.
One last thing, and I'll have to give up the podium. Do you think if you own a limited amount of money that's disposable that you can do you think you're better off, and you've got these several causes that you really like, are you better off sending a small amount to each? Or is it better for a charity to get a large amount and the others not, thinking that the other somebody else will make up the difference. What do y'all think?
That's a good question. I think of that quite often, but I think of a dear lady at Caratoman Baptist Church who was of very limited means. And I don't know what the organization was. It wasn't related to the church, as I recall, but we were just having a simple conversation. She and I were riding somewhere. And she said, I can only give $1. And she said, but I'm going to give that $1 because if everybody gave $1, it would be very good. And I think of that very often.
Well, I apologize to our people at home because I wanted to bring them into discussion, but that was rather difficult in order to do.